So today I want to focus on how we build that interface using TKInterface widgets. So I'm going to introduce the widgets to you, and then I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to construct a simple program using the widgets. All right, so the frame widget goes inside the window, and the frame actually can look like any of these really ugly three-dimensional old school Windows kind of shapes. If you've been using Windows long enough, this vibe looks familiar to you. However, we can also change this to invisible. Actually, it's invisible by default. Okay, so the frame border is not visible by default. If I make it visible, I can do relief equals raised and get the 3D look. I can do relief equals solid and I'll get the border. I can decide the border width. Every widget is going to have a master. And the master does not need to be labeled, but the master tells us what place in the hierarchy this belongs to. So if we go back to this, the content frame has a master of the main window. Each of these things has a master of the content frame. So I can have multiple content frames in my window if I want to do a more advanced layout, and each content frame can contain one or more widgets. Okay, so the frame is sort of the big idea when it comes to how you want to lay out your window. In this little window, right, there's just one frame and it's very simple. But if I wanted to, let's say, create a rock, paper, scissors game, okay, so now what I've created here is a window that has 3 frames. Okay, so I have a light blue frame on the left-hand side, I have a black frame in the middle, and I have a gray frame on the right-hand side. And each of those frames contains things, right? This one contains 3 buttons, this one has a couple of labels. And so now I can do things like I can click on the button and the computer will do its choice and then it will tell me the outcome in the middle frame. Now this isn't really wired to do anything except register when I click a button. So you can see down below, I'm printing to the console what button I'm clicking. But that's all this one does right now. But that's an interface that uses multiple frames. So if I want to create an interface, let's say so if I want to import TKInterface as TK, I'm going to start with the window equals, and this will be instead of root. Some people call it root. I like to call it window, so it makes sense to me. Equals TK.TK. That's the main element of what I'm going to be creating. Now, if I want to change the shape of my window, because right now, I'll just show you window.mainLoop. Now, if I forget my main loop, the program will run and then quit, run and then quit. And the reason for that is because it draws the window and then it closes the window immediately. So if I just do these 3 lines of code, then what it will show me is the standard TK window. That's the default size for a window on my system. And that's it. It will just stay there until I close the window. So let's do some things. Window.geometry. This is the method for changing the size of the window. So the window geometry takes one argument, and this is weird, but it does not take any numeric arguments. It takes a single string that has the dimensions of the window. So if I want a 800 pixel wide window by 400 pixel wide, I'm actually going to give it a string 800 x 400. I don't know why they did that instead of like a tuple or something mathematical or at least numeric. It's weird to me, but that's the way they do it. And I'm also going to give this a title. And because if I don't give it a title, let me just show you what it does. Oops, no, Siri, I don't want your help. All right. So if I don't give it a title, let's just run it without that. What you'll see here is it just says TK in the title. So that's not very fun. So if I want to change that, I can use window.title. And I'm going to say Mad Libs, because I'm going to make a Mad Libs program here. So if I run that, oops, I think that was supposed to be actually a method. Let's try that. There it is. Okay, so if I give that as an argument to a title method, it'll change the title to Mad Libs. So there's my window. And in my window, I've got a nice rectangular window. I'm going to do, the left side is going to be where I input the data, and the right side is going to be where I show the results. So I'm going to use 2 frames in this window. So let's do left frame, and I'm going to call that tk.frame. Okay, so this is, I'm saying, let's create something called left frame, and let's set it equal to the TK object of frame. So I'm creating an instance of the frame object called left frame. And I'm going to give it a few required arguments. The first required argument is going to be the master. And I could say master equals window, but the first argument of every widget is always the master. So what does this belong to is what I'm saying. So the left frame belongs to the window. It's part of the window, or it goes inside the window. And so if I look, okay, so here are some more things that I can include. And if I just copy and paste those, I can get border width equals 2, relief solid. Now I don't want the width to be 350, that's too wide. I'm going to go 400 wide, and I'm going to go 400 tall. And if I run the program right now, what you'll see is that that window or that frame is nowhere to be found. And it is visible because I've told it to be visible. But what I haven't done is I haven't told it to show up. So I've created this entity called left frame. It exists in the computer's memory, but I haven't told it to be in the window physically. I haven't told it to display in the window. So there's one more command that I need to do, and it's a method of this left frame object, and it's called pack. And if I do that, then that says appear in that window. So now if I run this, there is my 400 by 400 frame with a solid 2 pixel wide border. Great, that's good. But what I want is I want it to slide over to the left-hand side because I want a left side and I want a right side. So by default, things stack from the bottom to the top. It's like if you turn gravity upside down, okay? And every time you add something, it's going to slide up to the top in the middle. So this slides up to the top in the middle. It just happens to take up the whole thing. But if I had 3 more frames below it that were smaller height, they would just stack up one after the other. So what I want to do is I want to tell it, let's take the way these stack and let's shift it so that it stacks this way. I want it to slide all the way to the left. So if I do that, if I want to do that, I'm going to say side equals left inside the pack, just like that. And then when I run that, you can see that frame goes to the left-hand side. Let's create a right frame. I'm just going to copy this code and I'm going to change it to right frame. And so now I've got 2 frames. It's kind of hard to see that there are 2 here, but you can kind of see the black border around them. And since these 2 equal the exact size of the window, they kind of fit snugly in there. So those are my frames. And that is the frame widget. And that's how we get started with any program. Now, I'm going to shift a little bit because I want to show you something. From Canvas, there's a huge amount of resources linked. And if you go to this TK-Interface tutorial, or this TKInter widgets actually is the one I'm thinking about, that will take you to this page that shows you example code and options for every single widget that I'm going to show you. So there's basic widgets, and then there's a link that says more widgets. So and this is actually in the form of a tutorial that will walk you through how to use. If you want to become a TK interface expert, you can here. Also note on all of these pieces of code that you'll see 4 icons next to different code examples. Pay attention and only use the Python code, which is that blue and yellow icon that looks like snakes that are intertwined. That is, and it's the top of the examples in every one, but that's the example that you want to use if you want to learn how to use that particular widget. So every widget that I'm going to cover has extensive information here. And if you're like, well, that's good, but I don't think I'm seeing all of the things that I could possibly do with that widget, you can also go from there, from that page, you go to the top under resources and you go to the Shipman TKInter reference here. And this is the definitive TK interface reference from the people who created it. And if you look, each one of these has a reference page. And this has all of the options for that widget type, and then links to more information. But here are all of the things that you can change. You can change the cursor, the height, the padding, the relief. So you can find out what are the possible things that I can do. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do optionally. Most of it's not required to make the program work, as you'll see really quickly here. So moving on,